David, you ready? Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, we're almost ready to get started. And everybody, Rob, you're still there, right?
I'm good, but I really can't do very well. Very, out of task on my,
Is that you, Rob?
I think that's Rob.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm on the line, but there's a lot of static.
There's a lot of staff. Let's see, I didn't call, but they want to check it, right? Yeah. Let's see.
Apologize, the whole phone system is down, APS down. A CenturyLink line today, and so the whole phone service is down, so apologize.
There's no line to it. We can just do it old fashioned. Let's come off the speakers and let's see what happens with.
Chuck, can you say something?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you here?
Yeah, you're very
I think
clear.
I think it's on Rob's side.
Yeah, I think when I spoke to him, it was kind of scratchy.
Okay, he's
Might
calling
ask
back.
Rob to call back again.
Yeah, he is.
Hello?
Hi, Mary.
Okay, that's better, Rob.
Okay.
Chuck, are you still there? Chuck?
You may have to dial him back.
You know what, I'm
This
gonna,
conference.
Rob, I'm gonna have to call you
Yeah.
back because I got Chuck on the other line, okay?
Or just
Okay.
conference.
Okay. I can't go back to get rid of the
Sorry
other
about
call
that.
first.
Hey, Jack, you should try in the classroom.
Okay.
I think anybody with CenturyLink right now is, not to say anything bad about CenturyLink. There was an issue created by
Wait a
APS
minute, this is being recorded.
It's the official position.
that brought that down.
Rob? Chuck was trying to call.
problem.
Rob. No, I'll get it. I think it'll be fine. I think we just want to. I think the sound's in it.
Hello, this is Rob.
Okay, let me get Chuck on the line, okay?
All right. I'm here.
Okay. All righty, I think we're back on again. Oh my gosh. Okay, are you there?
Did hang up.
Yes.
They on separate speakers, are you trying to meld them into one together, or?
They're on the same speaker. It's just,
Can we just put them on speakerphone without using the speakers?
then it's an issue with hearing.
Right. And bleeding over the top somehow.
Sounds like you're a little fearful.
Chuck? Chuck?
I'm here.
Okay, hang on, I'm gonna get Rob, okay?
One more time.
Don't hang up.
This could be the one.
Third time's a charm. Right. Third time's a charm.
Technology. Rob? Rob, are you there?
Hello?
Okay, there you go. Okay, hold on, don't go anywhere.
Okay, all right.
All right. Okay, are you both still there?
Yeah. I'm here.
Okay, let's get started.
Make a motion to
Fast.
adjourn.
Yeah. So we gotta go, we're gonna go quick. If we could, it's 5:34 and after our, little bit of technical difficulties, we are, gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order, if we could, please. Mayor, if you would call the roll of the board, please.
Okay, Mr. Kirby,
Yes,
Mr.
here.
Lopez.
Here.
Mr. Hennis,
Here.
Mr. Wright,
Here.
and Ms. Harrington.
Here.
First up on the agenda tonight, this evening this is a working session that we're working on tonight, and we're just kind of discussing where things are and what is happening within our district, and to get some legal advice and then potential ideas and thoughts from our superintendent and her team as far as what we may or may not do going into the future. So we're down to B, mask mandate discussion, or just mask discussion, I think, because I hate to say mandate.
Sure, President Hennis, rest of our governing board members and guests. We're here to talk about what's happening in our environment and really, what responsibility we can have, and we need to consider to talk openly and transparently regarding masks and the mandate in Arizona and what our next steps are. So I've invited Mr. Haas to share some information with you, and you will be able to ask questions, engage with him, and then we'll go from there. At the conclusion of that time, then I'll be able to share additional information if it's warranted. So Mr. Haas, would you be so kind to share where we are right now with schools, and then, of course, answer questions from our governing board members?
Just for clarification, Rob Haas
Good evening, everyone.
is the district attorney. Okay?
Good evening.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So where we are is, as you have probably heard and know, the last session, the legislature passed a statute that said school districts could not require masks, could not require vaccines. That statute is set to go into effect on September 29th. A bill that's passed into law doesn't take effect for 90 days unless there's an emergency clause, which this bill did not have. Although it does have language in there that once it becomes effective, the effective date is retroactive to June 30th. That's kind of a legislative trick, if you will, that they have available, the legislature has available to it. So as law was passed, there have been a few districts that have said they are going to require masks anyway. And one of those is Phoenix Union High School District. And after its board voted to require masks, then one of its teachers filed a lawsuit saying that board vote was in effect contrary to the statute. The teacher's lawsuit against the district asked for a temporary restraining order, which is an emergency order that would, had the court granted it, would have prohibited the board from enforcing its vote to require masks. In response to that lawsuit, the district, Phoenix Union High School District, moved to dismiss the teacher's lawsuit on a variety of grounds, and that lawsuit, there was an initial hearing on that matter a few days ago. Earlier in the week, the court, Maricopa County Superior Court, denied Phoenix Union's motion to dismiss the teacher's lawsuit, meaning the lawsuit will go forward. It also denied the teacher's request for this temporary restraining order, which is kind of an order, emergency order at the beginning of the case that would have been in place while the rest of the case was litigated. The court denied that request for a temporary restraining order and ruled that the statute that prohibits a district from requiring masks or vaccines is not yet in effect and will not go into effect until September 29th. At which point it will be retroactive to June 30th. So that's the Phoenix Union law too. ASBA, AEA, a few board members from various districts, a lot of them in Central Phoenix, and then in Tucson, then filed a lawsuit against the state, alleging that the statute that was passed is unconstitutional. And nothing's happened on that lawsuit as of yet. The governor's office, the governor has indicated that he has extra money available to districts to dole out if they're in compliance with Arizona law. And you know, would presumably withhold that from some districts if he thinks that they're not. That's kind of the legal landscape. And so options the board has available to it is one, to go ahead and let people choose whether they're going to wear a mask or not wear a mask. And you're gonna not make some people happy if that's the vote, obviously, or if that's the direction you take. There have been a number of districts that have emphasized wearing of masks and stating they want to, they would require masks, but recognize the legislation that's been passed. And so they stated that masks are the default position, but they allow people to sign an opt-out piece of paper saying that, they're opting out from that default position. And I provided a copy of one of those to Dr. Bass. Or the other option is to join forces with the Phoenix Union and a couple of other districts and, say you're going to require masks. Our view is that at least through September 29th, a school district is able to require masks. There hasn't been as much emphasis on requiring vaccines. That really wasn't part of what the court ruled on in the Phoenix Union case. But at least requiring masks through September 29th, I think that's a defensible position in light of the Phoenix Union case's ruling. But then what would happen on September 29th, or between now and September 29th? Eventually the statute is going to go into effect unless ASBA's lawsuit gets been tossed out. Whether that will happen between now and September 29th is really, I think that's, I don't know of any hearings that have been set in that case. So I think it's unlikely that the court would move that quickly, although it could. And we're in frequent communication with Dr. Bass, trying to keep you guys updated on what the situation is. But so, yeah.
You say after the 9th, it's retroactive back to July 30th. And so, does that mean any of the school districts that have implemented these mask mandates, that the state has legal force to go at us and do whatever they want to do to retribution?
Well, that's the big question, Mr. Wright. So right now the statute is not in effect. according to the judge that ruled in the Phoenix Union case. And so if you require masks between now and September 29th and the law goes into effect, and is retroactively applied, whether the state would try to, for example, withhold funding from you for mask requirement that was in place between July 1st and September 29th, that's a possibility. How likely that is, I don't know.
That's certainly the penalty that Ducey is saying, but, again, when it gets down to actual actions, who knows what's gonna happen?
Yeah, so one of the big risks, that was incurred by requiring masks or even doing the opt-out provision is, as you may know, intentional acts are typically excluded from insurance coverage. And so I've talked with Dr. Battle and, alerted her to that is a risk. If the board votes, for example, let's use Phoenix Union as an example, Phoenix Union board voted to require masks. That was an intentional act. Had that been an illegal act, there was possibility of losing insurance coverage. Initially, the trust, which is your insurance carrier and the carrier for almost all of the school districts in the state, declined coverage for Phoenix Union in that lawsuit. It has since said they are going to provide a defense. I believe they're doing that with a reservation of rights, but I don't know that for a fact. A reservation of rights means they're providing a defense right now, but as the information unfolds, they can, if they conclude that based on new information there's no coverage, they still have the option of declining coverage. But, so I think the effect of that for you is certainly if you do the opt-out provision, I think the risk of the trust declining coverage is very low. I don't speak for the trust on coverage, but since they're covering Phoenix Union, I think the risk to you would be very low if you did the opt-out. If you do the masks are required, then the risk is elevated some, but that's the Phoenix Union situation. They're providing a defense in that case. But I think if you require masks, you have to leave open the option of changing that requirement based on changes in the conditions within the district or prior to September 29th, revisiting it and, getting a current assessment of the effect of the statute that was passed.
Rob, this is Jack Ennis. And just as a question, what, in the law itself, there aren't any specific penalties, correct?
The statute that was recently passed does not specify any penalties for violating the statute. The Phoenix Union teachers lawsuit did not seek money damages from the district. It sought an order saying the district has done something it had no authority to do, and therefore it was asking the court to order Phoenix Union to stop doing it. If the situation develops where, I don't know, if there was a damage type of a lawsuit was filed that sought damages, then those damages would likely be some kind of personal injury damages, which still have to be specified in the statute if you violate the statute and that violation causes damage to somebody, then, that money damage is a remedy that's available to the successful plaintiff. But the statute itself, you're correct, Jack, does not say, here's the consequence if you violate it.
Okay, and Rob, also there's, with our governor right now, there's other folks that are starting to weigh in on the actions. I believe the Department of Ed is started, especially with his, basically threatening, federal monies and withholding them from the districts. That the Department of Ed is also kind of weighing in on stuff.
Yeah, so, within the news the last couple of days, you may have seen some headlines that, the Office of Civil Rights, the Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights has, been encouraged by President Biden to look into whether, districts that, allow people to come to school without masks, whether that's somehow a violation of someone's civil rights. And the Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights does have the ability to withhold funding, although that's a drastic remedy they don't usually enforce, even when they find a district out of compliance. They usually go to some lesser punishment, such as training and revising your policies and those sorts of steps. And the situation that would be most likely to present itself in a way that the Office of Civil Rights would want to get involved would be some kind of vulnerable student or staff member that has some kind of disability where they would be alleging people's failure to wear masks is somehow putting them at an elevated risk and is denying them the right to a free, appropriate public education. That would be the most likely scenario of someone making an accusation that would be going to the Department of Justice. They typically move kind of slowly. I would say that if you've got if somebody went and complained to the Department of Justice, generally what happens is they get the complaint, they ask you to provide some information in response to a bunch of categories. We do that and explain why the district is compliant or if there's some non-compliant, why it doesn't really matter anyway. No harm, no foul kind of a thing. And then, they either ask to interview people and gather more information, or they just make a decision based off of what the district's initial response is. That process typically takes several months. It's not a fast, that's not a fast resolution.
And just describe to me now, and the governor Ducey, he threatened to withhold monies to the districts if they implemented some kind of using masks for the individual districts.
Yes. So, of course, the executive branch controls the money, state money. They don't control federal money. So you've got the state saying, hey, we're going to withhold money if you don't do what we want. You've got the Fed saying, hey, we may withhold money if you don't do what we want. And it'll be a spot. But I would think the state would move faster than the Fed, would be my guess.
Mr. Hawes, would you have the information, the money's $163 million that is being spoken to? aren't those dollars already allocated to specific schools for gap funds?
I don't know for certain on that. Tracking all the different grants and, things like that. I don't have that information at my fingertips. But likely you are correct that a lot of that money has already been designated for various things that you apply for grants for, things like that. Whether the grant allows the grantor to go back and say, we're terminating the grant, or you're out of compliance with the grant, and so we're therefore stopping continuing funding until you're in compliance. That would be grant by grant specific, and a lot of those grants would have those kinds of strings attached, that if you're not using the money properly, or you're somehow out of compliance with the grant, they would have the option to pull the plug until you are in compliance.
Rob, I was going to ask if you can please stay on with us for a while. Was thinking about maybe having, since we're talking kind of on a political basis of what's transpiring within our state, et cetera, I was going to ask Dr. Battle if we could do the board presentation that explains where we're at in the district with COVID, where we are, the state is at with the Delta variant, where things are as far as the effect on our students and individually here in our community, and what is going on in here that is, very important to this board as far as the safety and education of our students.
Thank you. First of all,
Okay, I didn't catch the question.
No question, just hang on the phone.
hopefully both can hear me. Thank you very much, President Hennis. And also I want to thank all of you that are here right now. I mean, it's important that we are here to listen and learn from our legal counsel and from our board as it impacts our students and our teachers. So while we may not all be on the same page, what we are on the same page with is that we care. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for that. Okay. So every week we have a chance to look at the county data. And we are watching. And as I have some of our teachers here, whether they're online or our directors that are online, or you, we're here to make the best possible decision, that is informed decision moving forward. And there may or may not be a decision tonight. But I think it's important, and I thank the board, that we're having this open discussion so we can all be transparent with the same information that we have. So that's really, really important. So thank you for honoring me to be able to share with you some thoughts. Here. There we go.
Right arrow,
Or mouse.
right arrow.
Yes. Okay. So slide 2, we thought it'd be important to take a look at where were we at last year. We have a year and a half worth of data, and thank you, county, thank you, school districts that have been monitoring some things. Different circumstances that we've looked at, but I'd like you to take a look at this slide. So August 2021, we have, this will be with me, thank you. We have 15 confirmed positive cases. On August 4th, 8 positive unconfirmed, and 74 quarantined, and 8 getting tested. And I won't read through all because you all can read, but you see what happens as we progress from August 11th, where numbers have increased, not only here in our school, but also in the community. And this slide represents our school.
Dr. Bell, just before you leave those, explain what happens when a student or staff member is required to quarantine. What happens with the education process for them, or what is required of them before they can come back to school, or what is required?
Yes, actually, there are some sequence of steps, and I'll generalize it for you, as our parents and teachers and community have received that information, therefore also posted in our schools. Therefore, if someone's in close proximity, they are contacted, adult and or student. And close proximity means you're in the space. You're in the classroom, you're in the gymnasium, you're somewhere in close proximity. Now, exposed definition from the Pinal County CDC is that you're within 3 feet. So those that are in close proximity, CDC says, we let you know, and if you've been vaccinated, then you may return. If you haven't been vaccinated, there is an opportunity to do more contact tracing with a nurse and or adult and or parent to determine if you should be home in quarantine. The same is true with the adults, that if you're exposed 3 feet, we're asking you to go home per CDC guidelines. If you're in close proximity, then you're quarantined. But if you've been vaccinated, you've been able to come back. It's quite complex, and some situations are clearer than others. We do the very best we can to listen what you know, and quite honestly, the majority of our parents and students have been compliant. So again, thank you. So we're doing the very, very best we can to make sense out of each individual situation. So if you take a look at the 18th, you can see things are not getting better. The numbers are changing, what have you, but what's consistent are the number of quarantine cases that are increasing because of that compliance. You know, if you're in close proximity, whether it's 3 times during the day, our kiddos high school have 5 classes. And then hopefully they're involved in some extracurricular activities. We cannot say that all cases come from schools. We have little people at home that go to our wonderful feeder schools that live in houses with families, and therefore the information, so it is quite difficult and sometimes feeling quite impossible. But we're working the best way we can. You know why? Because we care.
So just as a question, you had, at one point you had 156 quarantined in that week. So you probably had some lag over from the week previous with the 80 that were quarantined also.
That's
So
new.
That's new. That's all, those are new.
New that day, that particular time.
That
particular week. Yes, sir. So that's a very good question. You know, we'll have a turnover where those 80 may not be the same ones that are going to be here, or whether or not they get tested as requested. And after 6 days, then they learn they're confirmed. So we tried to capture the data to monitor it in a way that helps us make sense so that we know what issues we have on campus and really do the best we can with our teachers who are also in that fray, having to determine whether or not their kids are going to have a teacher in the classroom and how we can manage. And it's quite complex, but we're trying to do the best we can. But you'll see at the bottom of that chart, second semester, 2021, there were no cases. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And hopefully this is VG. Similarly, so if you take a look at the progression, the number of quarantine, the number of confirmed cases, as well as those getting tested.
Just clarifying, at any given point, there's about 3,200 kids, total students in the district.
Yes, sir.
And at any given point, at one point, there were almost 300 people in quarantine,
Yes, sir.
which
That's
is 10% of our population.
That's correct. So you can take a look at it that way. It's about 10% of our population. And we also know, if we were talking budget, the great questions that we were asking, at the end of the year, as it relates to average daily attendance, if we're not at the 10% threshold, there's budget implications there too. So we're trying to do the best we can, and I'll talk a little bit about what some strategies we have in place, but it's important to know. So Pinal County, if you take a look back in March 2021, did I just change it? Sorry. Yes. That's right one. Did I move too fast? Okay. 2021 in March, the percent positive 3.7, and then it went to 4.6 in May of 2021. Now, during that time, these were the conditions. masks were worn. There was a modified schedule. Okay, so the executive order, which was in 2110, excuse me. And then less people in the classroom and the community availability of vaccines. Okay, so the conditions during that time were as such. Now let's take a look at July, August percent positive. 12.3% up to 12.9%. And the transmission is high right now. That is at the county, and then let's take a look at the conditions currently. Masks are optional. Regular schedule, we have more people in the classroom as we return, and then vaccines. Right now, currently, this is really important. As of yesterday, there are only 39% in Pinal County that are vaccinated.
Yeah, and I think Kelly just mentioned that there are probably more within Casa Grande, but Pinal County as a county is one of the lowest or lower ones in the state as far as total vaccination.
Yeah. And why that's important, thank you for that. We have kiddos that come from all over. So the intention to use that number was not to make things look less or more dire, but we have kids that we are transporting back to our district from lots of different places, including the feeder schools. So some things I just think to consider. The number of students and staff cases in the district and in the feeder schools are increasing. I have opportunities to talk with superintendents in Pinal County. We had a meeting yesterday morning, and the numbers are large. Schools are closing. Again, schools that may be feeding into our schools. We're not sure, and please know, the data we have is what's reported. We don't know what's not being reported. So that's important to consider. The weekly Pinal County benchmarks continue to be in high transmission range. As I said earlier, only 39% in Pinal County are vaccinated. My statement, we should do what we can to support current transmission issues so that we do not have to educate students virtually again to the extent that we've had to do in the past 2 years. Minimize the need to quarantine teachers and students who are in close proximity or in close contact with confirmed COVID cases. Minimize the need to, already said that. We want to educate students in an environment that minimizes the risk of transmission of COVID to other family members. And then 2021, as I said earlier, resulted in school closures, deaths, sickness, loss of learning, social emotional challenges, expenses, loss of social interaction. No one wants to repeat that.
And just for clarification, our students age-wise are 14 to 18 years old
Yes, sir.
and could be available to be vaccinated if they chose so. And our staff also vaccinated, but I mean, obviously some potentially not.
This is true, and this is what we're finding, even in the quarantining. We are not asking whether you're vaccinated or not. So through the sequence of learning and contact tracing, if someone says they're quarantined, then we're able to follow CDC guidelines if they're in close proximity and they come back. That's the only way we do, and we've actually practiced how to do that without outright asking the question. And some people just self-disclose because they say, but we're not asking them to bring in vaccination cards or any of that. It's an honor system.
Dr. Matt?
Yes, sir.
I want to go back to your considerations. This fifth bullet here, minimize the need to quarantine teachers and students who were in close proximity or in close contact with confirmed COVID cases. What is going to be your method of doing that?
So it all depends on what we board decides within the proposal part that I am going to share with you. So one would be what we do with masks. And then I do have some other things that we'll talk about relative to outdoor, indoor experiences and extracurricular considerations, all at a high level. So, I'm not getting ahead of myself. I want to make sure that we're able to have an opportunity to present, to let our community know what we're thinking about, and of course, and very important to me, that the board has an opportunity to ask some questions.
I guess one of the key things that, and I was, just happened to get a text from a gentleman grew up here in Casa Grande, attended and graduated from Casa Grande, had an older child that graduated from Casa Grande, and now he has a high school. And he said that he hopes the board will do the most possible to make sure kids stay in school, in-person learning this year, because that he felt that his, the daughter, that it was a dramatic online was a tough lesson, a lesson that we had to do because of the situation. But the board, that he recommended the board do the most possible to make sure kids are kept in class and in a safe situation for themselves and for staff and teachers.
Yes. And, as I said, there's a lot of people that are hearing, and some of us think differently. And I commend everyone in this room and everyone online, because we're here because it's important to us. So thank you for that. President Hennis. Mr. Lucas, are you good with this slide? Very good. So as far as staff tracking, another snapshot. You can take a look as we're looking at this data. And again, I have to commend everybody, teachers, staff, students, parents. Our nursing staff is tough. And some people aren't always nice. So they deliver some really tough news. And, all that we can do to encourage that what they're doing would be really appreciated. They're just the bearer of the information. So I just need to pause for a minute and say thank you to that group of wonderful staff members. So we take a look at the staff tracking, and we see, and also our human resources monitors this. So it's important to note, our nurses are not doing adults. Our human resources are working with our adults to give them counsel about what should happen per CDC guidelines and their unique situations. Our nurses are here to be nurses for our students, and therefore give the parents and the students the information necessary. So if you go back a few slides, you can imagine that's a lot. And so it's very difficult. So I want to make sure that I honor and respect both of those departments. So as far as the date reported, you'll see this is starting from August 9th and the number of confirmed cases, but also positive confirmed and quarantined. And then we have those that are waiting to get results. I'm very thankful that we don't have an overwhelming amount of teachers that have been confirmed cases, and it could be from a variety of reasons, whether they're being vaccinated in their close proximity. And also want to commend the teachers. I believe that they're being wise about the circle of 3 feet. So if they continue to do that, unless they're ill and they start seeing symptoms, then that would be helpful based upon our current circumstances. So thank you, teachers.
And just a question, additionally with that, finding substitute teachers is more than a challenge right now.
What's that? Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
We just had to have a little humor. But no, substitute teachers, President Hennis, is difficult. And I tell you, I had an opportunity to meet with some teachers yesterday who are really have got their kiddos and the teachers in the best interest, and they're doing what they can for many hours throughout the day. That's going to get even harder on their own person if that should continue. But I want to thank them for doing that the best they can. They had some really good ideas yesterday too. So that's the staff snapshot. The students at both sites. This is recent. As it relates to confirmed cases, again, that's within that week. So I wouldn't encourage you to total it. Okay, so within that week, those are the amount of confirmed cases. Positive, unconfirmed, that quarantine, big number again. And then those that are testing and waiting for results. And we get those calls throughout, 7 days a week. So parents are really doing their best to make sure that we know, but again, that doesn't mean that everyone's doing that. And some may choose to think that it's not COVID, and because symptoms are different, it's just not, it's a moving target.
Dr. Bell,
Yes, sir.
can you clarify really quick the difference between a positive unconfirmed and a positive confirmed?
Yeah, so what I'm understanding from the nurses is that they believe that they have the COVID cases, but at that point in time, they're waiting for the results.
I see.
Yeah, so we weren't sure about capturing that data, but that was the best thing we could do to see what the propensity might be once in fact they come back. So they're being quarantined.
Sure. Thank you.
My pleasure. So this answers your question, I hope, Mr. Lopez, relative to something for you all to think about. Okay, and I'm certain everyone in this room has been thinking about this. So one could be, based upon what Mr. Haas said, our legal counsel, we have, court cases that are around and about. There are some school districts that are considering masks being required with an option or an opt-out. So as we looked at this, maybe a consideration would be based on what parents have told me for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. The concerns about the masks when they did wear them while they were compliant. They did wear them, but then they shared some things that maybe there would be a time for them to come off. So then there would be a question for Mr. Haas that if you said, masks worn inside the buildings, but optional outside the buildings. So what that could be is that while we're in the space, and we know, and we've all seen the research, with the air ventilations, our systems are up to speed. With the opportunity in high school, kids are in the same classroom all day. They leave after 55 minutes, and then they're moving, and they're going to another classroom with a different group of kiddos. We don't have a cohort. However, some of the kids actually are going outside before they go to the next class. There's lunchtime. The kids can socialize. They can see gestures. They can have young adult opportunity to give 3 feet, but also interact and not be isolated, all for the hope of not having to close schools or close buildings or what have you. So I'll repeat, possibly require masks inside the school building and optional anytime they're outdoors. Or B, or C or D, but D today. Require masks inside and require outside of school buildings. So I'll repeat it better. Require masks inside and outside of the school building. So those are 2 things that you can, I would love to have you discuss, talk about. But along those lines, it's important for you to consider, what does that look like? What's the atmosphere of the school community that we want to have? First of all, you see it, both of them, the indoor and outdoor, building relationships. There wouldn't be an experience where adults and students and whomever would be creating animosity or fighting. It would be an understanding of teaching a culture that we all live in, that we have to respect others' opinions, respect how people feel about things that you may not agree with. We'd actually have a model of opportunity, as we do in any other area in high school, of how we grow up. How do we work with someone who may not agree with me? Am I mad at them, or do I understand them? And then I would also say, provide a positive learning environment while we're doing that. Incorporate social activities where students may appropriately engage. I heard it a lot. Parents, kiddos miss that opportunity to engage, but appropriate is the key, not eliminate. We would honor district and school rules, continuing. Provide for opportunity to take a break from the mask in a safe place. What does that mean? We have a classroom example, and we're teaching and learning, and we're doing great stuff. Dr. Bell, I need to just take this off a minute. It's just really tight and it's giving me a headache. Sure. Please go over there. You can do that. We'll give you a couple minutes. We have the research that says how long that needs to happen and not happen. And then we invite you back into the space. You're not made to feel like something's wrong with you or that you're being adversarial, but we're actually working in the space in a very respectful and honoring way between the adult and student and student to student. Outdoor expectations, same thing. Build relationships, respect choice of mask, no mask, support appropriate social distancing, create an atmosphere where we respect differences.
We need to hold for just 1 minute. Chuck got disconnected. Dropped.
Oh,
There's a fire with that.
I think Rob's on too.
Oh, no.
You've been doing a wonderful job. I didn't hear it play, but I'm old too, so.
Hello?
Sorry about that. I didn't know you guys weren't there. Hold on, I gotta get Chuck back on the line.
Okay.
Rob, how long have you been off?
I dropped off a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah, looks like he tried to call me back about 6.
well, fortunately, we are recording.
You back?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry about that.
I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, you might
Rewind.
go back just a couple of slides specifically on proposals, because we want to make sure Rob has a chance to hear
Sure.
about where your thoughts might be.
My pleasure.
Potential.
So Mr. Haas and Mr. Wright, I'm on slide 11. And so I'll do a repeat a little bit here, and it's my pleasure to do so. So a thought might be to require masks inside school buildings and then have it optional outside. Anytime a kiddo is in passing periods at lunchtime, before school, after school, when they're not in the building, that could be an option. Of course, when they're in the building, we'd all be reminded to put a mask on. Okay, and then B, require masks. Require masks inside and outside of building. So that would just mean that a mask would be mandatory. Questions about any one of those?
And then I think Chuck and Rob, she just highlighted the indoor, and now that you have that slide in front of you, the kind of the potential positives and of what the effect on students and staff, et cetera. If you guys have that slide.
This one, slide what, 12?
Are you both still there?
I'm here,
Okay, all right.
can't hear much.
Yeah, maybe if you could move a little closer to the microphone and the phone, that would be helpful for me.
I didn't plug it in that one.
Actually, I'll run it for you and you can come over here and.
Okay, speak here.
Yep.
Be my pleasure. Thank you. Okay, how about that?
You can push the button.
Sounds much better.
Oh, she's got-
All right, we good out there too? Awesome, okay. Left-handed. Oh, you gotta turn it for me?
Why is it moving?
Are you kidding? I was using the arrow.
I know. That is weird.
Rob, if you can hear, one of the possible ideas was to require masks inside the classroom,
Okay, then,
school buildings, and then have it be optional in passing period, outdoors, activities, lunch, before school, after school, you know, that whole deal. Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's some risk that the state would not get out of compliance. You know, but in light of all that's going on, with people missing school and the uncertainty of it all, whether the numbers are rising, lowering, staying the same. But again, that is a sound approach, but there's some risk that the governor gives you with view that as out of compliance. If you do that, my recommendation would be that you also say that you are going to revisit that as circumstances change and when merits are reviewed, and you'll do a final review sometime shortly before September 29th, so that you can then, decide what needs to happen as of that date.
I have a question. If we offer the sample opt-out form, does that still mean we're out of compliance because we're still mandating it, or does that help with that piece?
Rob, did you hear that question?
No, I didn't.
No.
Okay,
I'll try to be louder. If we use the sample opt-out form as an option, are we still considered out of compliance?
In my view, you would be compliant because you're not requiring anyone to wear a mask.
I
So,
want
I
to,
mean, there's less risk of that, less risk using the opt-out than saying you're going to require masks in the classroom. But how big that risk is, that's really an unquantifiable thing at the moment. But the opt-out is less legal risk. But if you do the classroom mask requirement, I think you're going to need to say you'll revisit that no later than, late September.
and just for clarification, you're speaking in regards to both proposals. Proposal A being that masks are required in and outdoors, and proposal B being that a mask break is essentially provided outdoors. Both would put us at a risk of non-compliance, is what you're saying, correct?
I think the governor's office's view is that a mask requirement is not compliant with Arizona statute on school property. The statute uses the term school property. Now, I don't know that anybody's gonna come after you if you're saying you don't have to wear a mask outside. But, indoors, any kind of requirement of mask indoors, everything I've read from coming out of the governor's office, he would view that as out of compliance.
I have a question actually for Dr. Madden. Do we have any feel from the teachers and the staff as if they would be okay with some sort of mask rules? I mean, I know we see the data, it definitely shows that last year when everyone was wearing masks, we didn't have this issue. Clearly, there is some science behind it, but would there be pushback from the schools?
I have not surveyed them, just to be clear. We do have teachers and students that are wearing masks now. I did send communication to the staff to let them know about this evening. I'm 100% sure teachers would communicate with me and or you one way or the other, but out of all fairness, I have not surveyed them.
And last year, in any of the times when we were back in, when we tried to do the best we could to have kids back on campus, and the teachers were amazing with what they did, and the staff did a great job of getting the filtration and cleaning, and I mean, it was a yeoman's effort. All of the teachers at that time and students were wearing masks, because that was really the only mitigation avenue for us to be back in full period, full on in class, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. The slide that reports 0 cases, we were all masked up across the state.
I can tell you that my daughter's in middle school and I encouraged her to wear a mask, but because it was not required and it's not the cool thing to do, she took it off the second she went on campus. So, I mean, that's the reality if parents are like, hey, maybe you might want to think about this. Whereas if all the friends and teachers are wearing it, it's, you know, it's for your safety. I mean, just food for thought, really.
And the risk of that may decrease if one has to sign an official paperwork by their parents in order to officially opt out, right? And I guess I want to get clarification on this. I want to make sure that we would still not be a risk for non-compliance if a student doesn't have this opt-out form signed by their parent. The school would still have authority to require them to wear a mask indoor or outdoors, correct?
That would be correct, and if we went that route, we create a system that would be reasonable and like, trying to educate kids, that would not be too overwhelming for everybody.
And specifically, some of the, when I saw some of the opt-out, most of them specifically were districts where they were requiring masks. The opt-out had to do specifically with health issues, specific reasons why they were opting out of the mask, et cetera, as opposed to just, you know, trying not to do what was in the best interest of all the students and staff.
I'm feeling problem.
President Hennis, I would say Mr. Hawes can let us know if we were to, one, require masks and our board members approve that. Could we have additional stipulations in the opt-out form that you shared with me?
Yes, we could modify the opt-out form to, for example, this isn't happening, but which will, boundaries around that, you know, you can do that. The more boundaries you put, the more risk you're taking on that you are would be out of compliance with state statute that says you cannot require masks. Again, those types of steps, if you do them, my suggestion would be that you realize that you should revisit that all prior to the end of September when the statute is, you know, set to go into effect. But if you wanted to, you know, narrow the options for when people can opt out, again, yes, you can do that, but you're more likely to be found, if challenged, to be requiring masks, which, of course, Governor Ducey says you can't do.
Yeah, Rob, I guess the point is, I wasn't specifically talking about here. What I had seen on some other places where they were asking about students opting out, there was specifically where they had to come in if there was a mask requirement. I guess the essential bottom line is everybody, if any district in the state, even with your opt out, is essentially if the Governor Ducey decides that it's not correct, you're going to be, whether you're in the opt-out option program or you're separate, if he decides that he doesn't like that, then anybody and everybody that falls in that, even with your opt-out legalese, is still going to be at risk.
Well, of course, what we're trying to do by developing this opt-out plan is to just give people an added option to strongly encourage masks. You know, now if governor doesn't like the opt-out version, you're still fully able to argue that you're not requiring masks. That there is an avenue for someone who doesn't want to wear it to get to that point. And, you know, that would be the pushback that we would do, is that, you know, they're not required. Parents have as long as they want to not wear one. So that's not a requirement. under all, light of all the public health guidelines and the situation on the ground in the local community that exists right now. We wanted to have, district's default position, people should wear masks.
I guess Taylor just asked the question of how do you, you can't have essentially a non-compliance officer walking around finding out if they're carrying a form that says, I've already opted out.
Yeah, there would certainly need to be devised a system whereby that could be verified by the teachers in the classroom.
Yes.
And I don't think that would be that complicated, but I do wonder, forgive me, I may be splitting hairs, but I am wondering about the legal landscape vis-a-vis social distancing. If the district has official social distancing measures, is there any problem with that? And second, if I'm imagining a scenario where a teacher perhaps has one kid in their class that opted out, one kid that's maskless, if that kid is given special social distancing procedures, would that run the district into legal trouble?
So let me just repeat that to make sure that I got it. So the question that I heard was that if a student had opted out, would the teacher be able to require that student to social distance from the rest of the class?
Yeah, or that's correct, or social distance in a way beyond what is already happening with the 3 feet radius.
Okay, could you maybe repeat your question? I'm sorry, and maybe move as close to the mic as you can. I apologize. It's difficult.
Sorry, I'll come a little closer. Yeah, my question is this: if a teacher has one student or a couple of students that have opted out, they're not wearing masks, could those students be given special social distancing procedures so as to mitigate the risk that they would spread or catch COVID? Recognizing that, for lack of a better term, singles those students out a little bit, but would allow them the freedom to not have a mask if they choose to opt out, and would serve the district's wider need of mitigating the risk of COVID.
I think the answer to that is yes. You could have those kinds of, additional safety measures in place. Everybody, I don't even think dubious that people shouldn't try to keep socially distanced or use these other methods to try to slow the spread. So if you did that from a legal point of view, yes, I think you could do that. You don't want kids walking around with a scarlet letter on their chest.
Right.
But those types of things, I think there's a valid, legitimate reasons for doing it. And you're doing it in order to allow them to follow their chosen course of not wearing a mask, that extra burdens on the teacher in the classroom to try to keep track of all this, stuff.
Well, I mean, with the opt-out, sorry, I was just going to say, with the option of opting out, that extra burden is in many ways already on the teacher and maybe unavoidable.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Feel free to say.
I will, thank you. Feel so well.
All right, well, one, I think that's great discussion. And also I think out of all fairness, because I'm always one to be transparent, we strongly encourage social distance. We strongly encourage, masks. And in some instances, we got large class sizes and others, they're smaller. So I want to be full transparent as our staff and teachers are observing, and I wouldn't want them to think that I would not be honest. So that's, I want to make sure we put that in. As it relates to the rest of the slides, and I'll go ahead and start again because you may have missed this, gentleman on the phone. Indoor expectations, I'll go through quickly. Building relationships, no expectations. Have a positive learning environment. Pretty much what the indoor and outdoor expectations are speaking to is that we would do everything we can not to create angry and adversarial situations. We would continue to educate and help kids and really come from a perspective that they're not deliberately not following rules if in fact we go down this path. They just may have forgotten. And so it's called grace. So that's what we work towards. As far as the extracurricular activities, and that's a big question that people would have, again, if we went down this path, is that people do want to have their kiddos being able to do what they do well within their gifts and their passions, and then also in an environment that's considerate of others. What that looks like could look different, lots of different places. That's where we are. That's where we are, outside of school too. And also support CDC guidelines, social distance as appropriate, at all fairness. Quarantine confirmed COVID cases. Follow AIA sports and activities return to play guidelines. That's a meeting all by itself. And then masks may be worn before school, before competitions, practices, and then coaches would wear masks. And again, this is all if anything should change as it relates to our mask policies right now.
Dr. Battle, a question, I believe we already have a issue with the Vista Grande football team and having to cancel a game or potentially reschedule sometime in the future due to COVID issues.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We have submitted to the opposing team a letter asking to cancel a game as we had a number of kids that were quarantined for sure and some that were COVID, including coaching staff. So we needed to follow the rules there and then not to put our kids in danger because they have not been in practice long enough to compete in the game. So I commend the athletic director and coaching staff there to recommend canceling that first game. And so there is no rescheduling. So football teams have 10 games, they've lost one. And not only that, an opportunity for our band to participate also and cheer and all other extracurricular activities.
So at this point, do we need to discuss, I guess, our plan moving forward?
Is that line? Oh, sorry. No worries. I think it's important. I just wanted to let you all know that all of these things, we're doing the best we can to stay on top of that. And again, another department I want to commend would be our maintenance department, working overtime, including the weather challenges on top of that. I'm not sure when they sleep. So I want to commend them as well. So all things you know that we talked about are on that slide. If you could go to the next one, please. And this is just me. You know, I actually, this is one of my favorite words. You know, hope is that everyone does his or her part to sacrifice a little for others, be a voice of reason, and provide an act of kindness. In doing so, we can get through this in due time.
In one kind of last question in regard to the numbers, et cetera. Fall is historically when, I mean, this is kind of, everything's ramping up hard right now with the whole state and the nation is ramping up dramatically and has been for numerous weeks now. But the fall is when you get not only that, but you get double whammy as far as influenza, the regular flu, and COVID, and everything else on top of that. I think they've seen that not just a concern that you get a double whammy of things working on the district at that point, and you know that the potential, what would happen to students, and you know missing school, et cetera.
And if I might add to that, President Hennis, I have a wonderful eclectic group of committee members. We call ourselves the Continuity of Learning Committee, and do what we can to think, you know, ahead of what did we learn and what are some things we need to consider. And that did come up today in that standing meeting was, you know, there's more than COVID. COVID is big. I'm not minimizing it, but people are wanting to do the right thing. And so they're making calls for what we would call what we get sick, you know, and so, they want to be compliant, they want to do the right thing, and we're not able to say, don't do them, you know. It sounds like it's COVID, so we need to follow through with that until 5 days later, and then you can get tested, right? So it's tough, it doesn't make anyone, feel good about it, and nor do we want anyone to get sick. With COVID, that is something more dire.
Any
That's the end
other
of my
questions?
presentation, sir.
Yeah, thank you, and that was excellent, we appreciate it, and I think there's some more detail, if you go to, I think Dr. Battle was gonna put up a link with Pinal County.
I really can't hear.
I think, Chuck, that Dr. Battle was gonna additionally put up a link to the Pinal County, COVID dashboard, where it allows you to drill down a little bit more as far as, where hospitals are, where the numbers are, where everything is, as opposed to just the Arizona, COVID dashboard gives you a lot of detail.
And I believe, Mr. Wright, it's in one of the slides. However, I'll make sure I send that to you all by morning.
Any other questions and any other discussion as far as with Dr. Battle, Rob Hawes, our attorney? Any other questions? Any other thoughts or feelings on that? If not, we're kind of at a crossroads.
Honestly, I think we need to do something to mitigate this because of the direction it's going. The next step is school shutdown, and nobody wants that. So I think we have to do something.
No, to add to Kelly's comment, I think we need to keep in mind that this is in fact the third academic year where we've had this conversation.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, there are seniors right now who have not had a normal year of high school since they were freshmen. And I completely agree with the sentiment that we need to keep schools open. And masks are an inconvenience, and they are painful, but they are also a means whereby we can keep our schools open. And I would rather our students and our teachers experience an inconvenience than what is the terrible, terrible experience of online learning or being quarantined.
Yeah, I think that is, and for those of you who don't know, Taylor's a teacher and has direct experience with this in the Chandler area, and so we respect, obviously being in the trenches on a daily basis and dealing with this, so we appreciate that opinion. And Rob's suggestion on last year during this time, or when we were meeting almost once a week at times to see how things were going and mitigation and how where things were doing. So the board is committed to the district and the students and the staff, et cetera, that we will meet and talk about this and view things on a daily. We were updated, and if we needed to meet, we met. And because the number one priority for us is keeping kids in school, healthy, safe with our staff, et cetera, and everybody getting a good education and trying to hopefully kind of catch back up to the previous, I hate to say 3 years, but the previous years. And Taylor is 100%. Yeah, I do like the idea of requiring masks in classrooms with the opportunity for students to have, and Rob, the other one, the key thing is where that was headed was, we will definitely be revisiting this prior to the 29th, per your suggestion, but we would be doing that period anyway, just to follow up. But suggestion of requiring masks in the classroom, and then having the passing periods open where kids can have that, and teachers, students, et cetera, can have that, have a safe, passage, et cetera. Is kind of, I think that was a great idea. Dr. Battle kind of presented that earlier today.
But I'll just add, as a teacher, that it is important for our kids to have breaks from the mask. And I think providing in the schedule a specific time for breaks increases the compliance with masks when it's time to have that mask on. So I second Jack. I think it's a really good compromise and a smart path forward for making sure that when our kids are inside, they're masked up.
So I guess at this point, if there's somebody willing to make a motion to that, we've had discussion, we've had recommendation by our staff attorney. We've had people kind of weigh in, et cetera, and if there is a motion to that fact, I think we could go forward if there's somebody interested in making that motion.
I have a question before we move forward.
Sure.
Are we also talking about implementing the opt-out form as an option?
I think
Rob had mentioned that if we utilize that as well, we are less likely to be out of compliance.
Yeah, I personally don't know how you can do both, is the concern that I have is with the opt-out, specifically for health reasons, et cetera. I mean, I think that is the only concern that I have is if you have 50% or something less than that, then you're not, what are you trying? I'm just asking.
I'm just thinking for those who are vaccinated, if you go to talk to the CDC, they are stating that masks are not necessary for those who are vaccinated. And so if parents want to opt out, if they feel that their child is safe, I mean, it's an option. I don't know, I might be opening a can of worms, but I think legally it helps offset that. And I believe there'd be enough parents that want the safety of their child that they would not opt out. They would just go with our recommendation of making it mandatory.
I would be very much in favor of allowing the vaccinated students to opt out if we had the capacity to verify their vaccination. That's what I worry about, right? Well, and that's my point, right? Is that we can't.
I mean, people are still getting sick.
And so,
Even after getting vaccinated.
and so the point I'm trying to make, well,
You're still closing the school, so what's?
well, let me finish my point, if I can. My point is that we can't verify, right? We can't ask. And so I am not sure, while I like the idea of being able to let someone who is not vaccinated opt out, I'm not sure that we can enforce it that way, right?
I do have a question, please, if I may.
This is kind of this is just a working, that we can't take, and I mean, it's legally, we can't take questions from the audience. So I truly apologize.
That's fine. We're just
For
wondering,
that.
does any of us get a chance to give our opinion?
There will be, at the next board meeting, at the call to the public.
So you're gonna vote on something we have no say in.
At this point,
How is that?
we can't have conversation. I appreciate that.
We made it open to the public for us to come, and then what's the point of us being here?
It's actually open to the public so that you can listen to what they're going to do. It's not so you can voice your concern. As you stated, and I am the AE, or the CGUHSD president of Teachers Union. I'm listening to what they have to say. I'm sorry that I'm interjecting, but I am trying to defend the district in this. If you want to have your say in it, you need to come to that next board meeting and you can voice your opinion then. But this is a working session for the board, using the information from our district attorney, the district attorney, not the district attorney.
I'm sorry, I can't hear any of this.
Mike is, Chuck, it's all right. Mike is just kind of explaining just a little bit, but we're gonna bring it back here to the dais right now. Anyway, Mike, thank you. Appreciated that, and we will be having a board meeting coming up, first part of September.
Yes, sir. That's correct. I believe that's September 2nd.
So I guess the question is, right now is, if there's an interest in going forward with this, or if there's a motion to be made, or what the board thinks and the recommendations that Dr. Battle offered. Was two potential ones or a third one with the option, I guess, as a potential, and what the board kind of thinks about that right now. We have the ability to take action, or you have the ability to table, and we can schedule another meeting. But the question is where are we at? And there's kids missing school all the time. So I guess the question is, what's the board's purview on where we're at?
I would like to add a little bit.
Sure, you bet.
Okay, I've listened to Attorney Hawes, I've listened to everybody here tonight. I've also gotten various emails from parents. And my view right now, as it stands after listening to Dr. Battle, is that we provide a sample opt-out form along with the recommendations for these kids to wear masks.
Thank you.
I agree. I think we give them an option with the opt-out form, but if we put the mandate in place, it makes it easier, even as a parent, if you feel that it's the safe way. That, you know, like I said, for a child that thinks it's uncool, doesn't give them the option to opt out if the parent has the desire for that.
President Hens, may I make a statement just for clarity?
You got it.
So what I hear is, Board Member Kirby was just mentioning as a forensics, that if in fact this is the direction that you're going, that opt-out could be a number of things. So I would not want this group or anyone watching to say that Casa Grande Union High School District is considering only those that are vaccinated. So I just want to be sure that I help support what I think I heard.
And I guess, in continuing discussion, was that a motion, Joe? Or is that just on
That
the table?
was my personal opinion.
Okay.
Because we've all shared our opinions tonight.
Right.
And I've heard the discussions pro and con. And I really feel that if we're gonna go forward with this right now, with the deadline of the 29th of September, that we provide the sample opt-out form.
And so, and definitely would be revisiting before the 29th, there's no question about that. The only question in that opt-out form, are there parameters or is it just wide open?
It's just open.
Currently, it's written as an opt-out form. However, the question to pose to Mr. Hawes is that we could have some stipulation in it. And if you approve this, I would work with the appropriate people and representation to make it reasonable and share it out for you all to see and then follow proper procedures in the approval of that policy.
Okay, and then the only other question was, just to clarify, requiring masks in classrooms, not in outdoors, and the opt-out is all part of that?
That's my.
Yeah, my understanding would be that you would require them in the classrooms only, not outdoors or in passing areas. And then there's the opt-out form if they didn't want to wear it in the classroom, correct?
Okay. So that's,
my personal feeling, and I would vote to that extent if you were to make that recommendation.
okay, is that your recommendation? Or is that
You're
your
asking
call?
me?
Yes.
No, I'm fine with that. I think that's fine.
I think we just have to have somebody make an actual motion in a second.
Okay, you want me to make it?
Sure.
This is recording. I'm gonna make a motion, that we do require masks in the classrooms, not outdoors. We will provide an opt-out form for those who do not wish to comply with the request, and then we will revisit this prior to, September 29th.
I will second that.
There's a motion by Kelly and there's a second by Joe. Is there any discussion?
Do we have a start date?
I guess that's the question. Dr. Battle, how long would it take to get information out and allow parents, et cetera, or actually students to fill the forms out, because it's students, not parents, that would be responsible for this, correct?
That would be part, I think we need parents to opt out. So all due fairness, and I say if you could at least give us a week to properly get it and then communicate and execute, I would greatly appreciate that.
I think that's Kelly's recommendation. Give it a week from, today is
August 30th.
Thursday.
So start on Monday.
Start on a week from Monday, which would be the 30th, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that good? Any other discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Can I add one more thing?
Can someone please read me the motion?
Yes. The motion is to,
Can someone get to the phone and read me the motion, please?
Mary's coming.
Mary's coming to you, Chuck.
okay, the motion is to require masks in classrooms, optional outside and during passing periods, with the implementation of the opt-out form, to take effect August 30th and be revisited prior to September 29th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so Mary, we'll go ahead and call for the vote, please.
Okay, Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Hennis,
Yes.
Ms. Harrington,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
and Mr. Wright.
I'm gonna vote no, because I believe, I haven't had a chance to participate in the conversation, because I couldn't hear what everybody was saying. And so I was at a disadvantage, but I would like to explain why I'm voting no. And the reason I'm voting no is, number one, I believe what we're doing is illegal, as Mr. Hawes explained. This short back to July 1st, when it takes effect. Number two, I believe with the opt-out clause, it makes this action more symbolic than anything else, because what happens if half our student body opts out? It kind of dilutes the whole process. And so I still believe masks should be an optional, should be the parents and students' choice. And we still have to obey the law that the state set down. And for all those reasons, I'm voting no on this action.
All right, the motion carries 4-1. And at this point, we appreciate it. We look at the direction and getting the word out and visiting with people. That gives us another week to see how our district is doing and what is going on with the state with associated lawsuits, et cetera. And at this point, seeing nothing else to come before the board, we will go ahead and adjourn. It is 7:02. Thank you.